Hey guys, have you heard of Goldbelly? It's this amazing site where they ship the most iconic, famous foods from restaurants across the country, anywhere, nationwide. I've never found a more perfect gift than food. Goldbelly ships Chicago deep dish pizza, New York bagels, Maine lobster rolls, and even Ina Garden's famous cakes. So, if you're looking for a gift for the food lover in your life, head to goldbelly.com and get 20% off your first order with promo code GIFT. That's goldbelly.com, promo code GIFT.
This is episode 377 of That Shakespeare Life.
Hi, I'm Dorian Fuller, an archaeobotanist. Another great method for studying the life of William Shakespeare includes listening to this. It's That Shakespeare Life with my friend Cassidy Cash.
Welcome to That Shakespeare Life with Cassidy Cash. Cassidy believes that if you desire to successfully learn or perform Shakespeare's plays, then understanding the real life and history of William Shakespeare himself is a must. That Shakespeare Life is the podcast that helps you go beyond the curtain of some of Shakespeare's most iconic works and explore the world of early modern England as Shakespeare would have lived it, learning from the writers, historians, and performers who know it best. And now, here's Cassidy.
In the year 1603, just as Shakespeare was writing Hamlet and the reign of Elizabeth I was transitioning to James I, Galileo Galilei, famous for exploring the heavens, was also measuring the invisible. Among his inventions was a device called the thermoscope, an elegant glass instrument that could detect changes in temperature centuries before the invention of the modern thermometer. And as Hamlet himself says, upon the heat and flame of thy distemper, sprinkle cool patience. This poetic image isn't talking about the thermoscope, but it does reflect exactly the kind of natural forces Galileo was learning to track. To help us understand how the thermoscope worked, what it tells us about early modern science, and where Shakespeare's world fits into this history, we're joined by Dr. Dario Camuffo. Dr. Dario Camuffo is research director at the Institute of Atmospheric Sciences and Climate at the Italian National Research Council. He's an expert in historical scientific instruments and climate history, with a special focus on the early history of meteorology and the devices used by figures like Galileo. His research includes reconstructions of thermoscopes and studies on how ancient instruments were designed, built, and used to observe the world, centuries before digital data and satellites. Before we begin, I want to let you know that there are bonus materials waiting for you on Patreon for this episode. If you'd like to see Galileo's thermoscope for yourself, explore 17th century illustrations, and dive deeper into the history we talk about here on the show, all of that is available when you become a patron. And if you're already ready to go hands-on, join Experience Shakespeare, where our activity kit this week lets you build your own version of Galileo's thermoscope using simple materials at home. You'll find the link to sign up and explore the extras on the show notes page at CassidyCash.com/episode 377. Hello, Dario. Welcome to That Shakespeare Life.
Thank you very much for your kind invitation.
Who was Galileo working with when he invented the thermometer?
When he invented the first thermometer, the ancestor of the thermometer, the thermoscope, was alone. He was teaching at the University of Padua, and he presented to his students a system like this one. This is a bottle. This is a pocket of air. And here inside, there is water. To be visible, he used the red wine. And when with his hand, he touched this flask, the air expanded, and the column of wine was going down. And this was, in practice, an ancestor of the thermometer, but not completely a thermometer, a real thermometer, because the level here was determined by the temperature inside, but also the pressure, the atmospheric pressure inside the cup of liquid. So this thermoscope was a curiosity to explain the law of gases, but not a thermometer. Other people like Santorius, Robert Flood, Drebbel invented the same, but all of them did not really invent this thermoscope, because there was a publication of Heron of Alexandria that was translated in Latin and Italian, who presented a device similar to this one. And also another book by Della Porta at the same period shown this as a curiosity. And Galileo had the mind to interpret the physics behind and explain what happened, and that it was possible to show that the gas, when it's heated, increases in volume. However, several years later, Galileo and the Academy of Cimento invented this instrument. You see it. This is called the thermometer of Galileo. This is composed of a number of bubbles that have a certain shape, not matter the shape. The matter is that they have a fixed volume and a certain weight. And this was counterbalanced by the density of the liquid. So if the liquid was warmed, these were heavy, it went down. If the liquid becomes colder, they goes up. And each of them has a different density so that you can read the temperature. Now I can see here is 24 degrees centigrade, because this is in the middle position.
Well, now, Daniel Fahrenheit wouldn't invent the Fahrenheit scale of measuring temperature until the 18th century, which is also when Celsius was invented, and Kelvin didn't show up for another century after that. So with all of these scales of measuring temperature not existing for Galileo, what scale was Galileo using to measure the temperature?
Oh, actually, Galileo and the Academy of Cimento in Florence from 1647 to 1657, made a lot of experiments about everything, just to understand if ice was formed always at the same temperature, and if this happened in the plain, but also in the mountains or in Northern Europe, and so on. So the Grand Duke of Tuscany organized an international network, sending to everybody a thermometer like this one, with a bulb longer, but sealed and with alcohol inside and some dots to see the position. All the thermometers, including those that you have mentioned, they had not degrees. They simply measured the level of the column in inches. Inches, and these were their degrees. So all thermometers had a different scale, and no scale were comparable. And starting from the Academy of Cimento at the end of the 17th century, Rinaldini started to say, well, we could use the boiling water. Somebody, yes, boiling water and freezing water. In Florence, Galileo and the company used to fix the limits with the cold water of the Arno River in winter and the hot of summer exposed in Florence at the sunshine. And this was the scale. But the problem with so in all the period, every thermometer had its own scale. And this was a confusion, a terrible confusion. And you had tens and tens of different scales. Each instrument had a different scale. And somebody gave the degrees without giving the calibration. And a problem was that if you use boiling water and freezing water or melting ice, as we do today, the problem is that not all liquids are linear. I mean, mercury expands linearly, but alcohol does not. And alcohol has a deviation of about 5 degrees at 50 degrees centigrade. So it was impossible to compare thermometers, so that they needed several calibration points. And at this point, for instance, in 1724, Fahrenheit suggested to use the body temperature because this was more similar to the summer in Northern Europe. 100 degrees was too much. Was not realistic. They needed very long thermometers for something that was never measured. So it was important to have a scale with some references. And Fahrenheit proposed the temperature of a human body in good health. So Newton proposed the thermometer with 18 calibration points. So everyone suggested something different, of course.
Were Galileo's work and details of the thermoscope published in England? Or you mentioned that it started out as a curiosity. How was it received? Did people want to use these outside of the scientific community, or was this strictly something scientists were exploring at this time?
Frankly, Galileo was never interested to publish on the thermoscope. He published on astronomy, on the problems of is the Earth that turns around the Sun, or the Sun that turns around the Earth, and this was his main problem, to see the star with the telescope. This was important for Galileo. Not too much the thermometer. The thermometer was, in any case, invented by the staff in which Galileo worked, and the little Florentine thermometer, the thermometer used internationally at the end, at the mid of the 17th century, was invented at the last year of the life of Galileo. Galileo probably contributed very much to this thermometer. And Robert Boyle went to Florence the last year of the Galileo lives. And when he returned in UK, with the help of Robert Hooke, made a pneumatic machine in order to control the pressure of a certain volume, and established the law of gases using a Florentine thermometer, a little Florentine thermometer, this sizes, and with mercury, not with alcohol. The first thermometers were with alcohol for a clear reason. Water was tested, of course, but may freeze, and when you have the thermometer frozen, you break everything. So it's not possible. So alcohol is a good candidate, and the mercury too. But the mercury, first, is expensive. Second, is very heavy. And for instance, the Grand Duke of Tuscany had always in his pocket some thermometers because he wanted to measure everything. He wanted that all rooms had in his building had the same temperature in winter. So, and they wanted to have to take eggs and develop them in a mild environment in order to generate the new life without the chicken. And so they did the experiments with these thermometers, but mercury was too heavy to use.
To carry it around and have it in all those places, sure.
Yes, but 1 century later or 2 centuries later, it was demonstrated that mercury was linear and it was preferable, and everybody used mercury. But this at the end of the 19th century, because the most remote thermometers were with alcohol.
Now, you've told us that the Galilean thermometer has the different glass shapes or the bubbles inside that were different densities, and that the liquid in the Galilean thermometer was alcohol. But what was used in the 17th century to make the different bubbles have different density? What were each of the bubbles filled with?
The bubbles were in glass, like this one. The Grand Duke had a very specialist glassmakers that worked for him. And they controlled the density by adding some weight.
With just rocks or metal or?
Metal, yes. Okay. Lead, for instance.
Okay. And so each one of them would have different amounts of lead, so that would make them have different levels.
Or greenness of sand or something, but this was not a problem. So there was a lot, something to compensate the volume, and they stopped when they reached the exact buoyancy of the sphere in the liquid at a certain temperature. So the problem of calibration, they could not calibrate in the sense we can do today with a bath, a reference thermometer, and so on. They had a reference thermometer. It made everything geometrically identically to it. And if it was really bigger or shorter, was discarded. So only the best survived, and they were identically each one, and they gave the same response for this reason.
Well, if we want to explore this history further, what are some resources or recommendations you can point us towards that would be a good place to start if we're new to this history and we want to learn more?
There are several possibilities. One is all the papers of the 17th century. They have inside the nice drawing. This is, for instance, the thermoscope. You see?
That's fascinating. It looks like a hot air balloon.
And this is a book of 17th century, but I imagine that is more practical to take a modern book that the best, certainly the best, is Middleton. Oh, can you see?
I can see.
History of a thermometer is quite dated. Is 1966. I am not sure that it has been reprinted. Maybe. And I should not tell it, but in my book on microclimate, I made a chapter on the history of the thermometer, another on the history of the hygrometer, another of the pluviometer, and so on. So you may find the image of the early instruments, how they were.
Wow.
The history and so on. What is not clear to this is another nice paper with original instruments. You see the little Florentine thermometer.
Yeah. Is that whole page different kinds of thermometers? Or just different kinds of scientific instruments?
Yes, Yes, there are several pages with with instruments. Yes, but the focus is that we should have in mind is that in the antiquity for meteorology, everybody made his own personal approach. And this was not the same for everybody. So that it was nearly impossible to compare data. And for instance, some thermometers were kept indoors, outdoors. You may ask, why indoors? For two good reasons. One, because they were with a glass work fixed to a wooden tablet with a iron wire. And if the tablet was outside with sunshine, with rain, and it moved, the iron wire shrank, and all the thermometer was broken. So it was impossible to keep them outside, except the earliest one in Florence that were completely made of glass. They were weatherproof. Those in the 17th century and 18th century were not.
They're much more fragile, yeah.
Because of this poor technology. In addition, somebody was interested to meteorology, but somebody else was interested to the life of people and the illness. So to measure inside buildings the temperature where people lived, this was important. And at the end of the 18th century, the thermometers had once again good technology and could be exposed outdoors. But with screen or without a screen, north or in any direction. So all of these decisions were taken starting from 1873. 1873 was the first meeting of the International Meteorological Commission that started to discuss these things. So that before the 20th century, data are hardly comparable between them. Or you must do a huge work to correct how to correct. For instance, to see if it was snowy. If there are snowflakes, probably the temperature is from plus 2 degrees centigrade less. And you can test in some way to control the quality of your data.
These are fascinating resources. We will link to all of these in the show notes for today's episode. Now, Dario, we ask everyone this next question here at That Shakespeare Life, and that's, what's the one book you would take with you on a deserted island? My friends in England tell me I'm supposed to allow you the complete works of Shakespeare and a copy of the Bible, so your choice would be in addition to those.
I have some doubts about that. If may I express more than one choice?
Yes, you may.
Because probably you could be disappointed by my choice.
Oh, no.
The first is following Galileo. Galileo told that God wrote two books. One is the book of the Bible that is interpreted by the clergy. And the second book is the book of the nature, all we see around, and we should interpret it because it's not written in letters, but in numbers and formulas. And this is to observe the nature and interpret it. This is my first choice. The second book is the memory and the conscience of everybody that should be consulted very, very often. And now, passing to some printed books, this Magalotti is dated 1667, and is the diary of all the experiments made in Florence during the period we were discussing. That is the discovery of science, the new science.
Well, that should keep you well occupied between the Book of Nature, the Book of Memory, and a 17th century book on the discovery of science. You would be well set up, for sure.
My last favorite book is The Little Flowers of St. Francis, because St. Francis looks at everything that is brother, sun, sister sea, sister water, sister death, sister or brother, everything. So there is a different way to look at the nature, not that we use the nature, but we live together with nature, and we should consider the world as a brother or a sister with the same respect.
That's a beautiful perspective.
Yeah.
I like that. Thank you for sharing these. Thank you so much, Dr. Dario Camuffo, for being here this week and sharing this history with us. I really appreciate you spending time to help us understand this part of Shakespeare's life that much better.
Many thanks to you for your courtesy and your interest. Thank you.
That's it for this week's look into the world of Galileo, glass tubes, and early modern science. A warm thank you to Dr. Dario Camuffo for joining us to shed light on the invention of the thermoscope and its remarkable connection to the world Shakespeare lived in. If you'd like to explore the resources mentioned in today's episode or view the detailed illustrations of Galileo's invention, you'll find everything in the show notes at CassidyCash.com/episode 377. Again, that's CassidyCash.com/EP377. That website is also where patrons can access this week's Experience Shakespeare kit to build a working model of Galileo's thermoscope at home. That Shakespeare Life is researched and produced by me, Cassidy Cash. Our audio engineer is Gary Mayholm. Until next time, may your glass stay unbroken, your curiosity stay burning, and your thermoscope always show fair weather. I'm Cassidy Cash, and I hope you learned something new about the Bard. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to That Shakespeare Life. As always, the best conversations happen after the episode over at CassidyCash.com. Become a part of a vibrant Shakespeare conversation by adding your voice over at the website. Until next time, remember, when you want to know William Shakespeare, you have to go behind the curtain and into That Shakespeare Life.